What's up? What's up? How y'all doing?
Well, Skip ditched me for the tease. He was gone, and he hasn't said anything to me yet. But
He's just a little bit emotional
He's
this
ignoring
morning.
me.
You know, my condolences, Skip. The smile is not because the Spurs lost. It's because I'm near South Beach. You know what time it is. You know, so that's what the smile is for, Skip.
Let's
that's
just get this over with.
That's all it is.
Skip, we love you. Oh, we love you. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, wish us all
Just ask the question. Ask the question.
Sorry, the Thunder closed in 6. Someone here predicted that, eliminating the Spurs after a 113-99 win in Game 6 last night. OKC jumped all over San Antonio in the first half and led by 24 points at halftime. The Spurs did make a late fourth-quarter run to make it interesting, but it wasn't enough to catch the Thunder. Stephen A., what happened to those Spurs?
They got overwhelmed in the second quarter, and they really couldn't recover from that. Over the last 3 games of this series, they just look old. They looked old and not nearly as productive as you had anticipated that they would look. In the case of Tim Duncan, that did not apply to him in Game 6 last night. If this were indeed his last game, he went out the way a champion is supposed to go out. I thought he played a really good game considering the circumstances. But, you know, when Andre Robertson is ending up hitting 3 3-pointers, you know it's a bad night coming your way if you're going up against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the Spurs couldn't hit a shot, couldn't get anything going. Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook were absolutely sensational. Kevin Durant finishes with 37. Russell Westbrook's finished with 28. You know, you just looked at it and you just 30-12 in the second quarter, 15-3 run to close out the half. Kevin Durant hitting that 3 to end the half. They just seemed locked in. They seemed focused. They were like sharks in blood-infested waters. They smelled blood. They knew what time it was. They came to finish the deal. And San Antonio, for some inexplicable reason, came out relatively flat. You expected them to play, as Skip had pointed out, angry, with Danny Green and those boys doing what they're capable of doing. But that wasn't the case. Oklahoma City was expecting an onslaught from San Antonio. They were expecting them to come out with fervor and energy, and they were ready to respond. And by the time the second quarter rolled around, when they ran up the score and outscored them 30-12 and went up by 24-25 at halftime, it was pretty much a wrap from there. San Antonio did come back. You knew that they were going to have those kind of guts where they would make it interesting. But in the end, you're not going to have that kind of deficit against Oklahoma City in OKC, and that's something that they're going to lose. And that's what happened. The talent that they have, the youth, the size, the physicality, it all came together at the most appropriate time. And that's why they're going to the Western Conference Finals, and the San Antonio Spurs are going home. You expected LaMarcus Aldridge to negate that. He wasn't up to the task. You expected Kawhi Leonard to negate that. He wasn't up to the task. And you knew the big three, Duncan and Ginobili and Parker, weren't going to be up to the task either. So it is what it is.
Okay. Before I unleash, I want to congratulate. I'm going to congratulate Molly. She predicted correctly. What did you say in 6? Way to go, Molly. I'm sure you were thinking that after the first 3 games. I want to congratulate the Oklahoma City Thunder for being better than my San Antonio Spurs. I especially want to congratulate Kevin Durant for being the best player on the floor in this series. And last night, when it mattered most, Kevin Durant was virtually unstoppable. I want to congratulate Steven Adams for having a breakout series against my Spurs. I thought he was sensational from start to finish, played hard, played athletic, dominated the backboards on offense and defense. I even want to congratulate Andre Robertson for doing the job that he did on Kawhi Leonard, because I thought he was spectacular defensively on the Defensive Player of the Year 2 times. And I want to congratulate Billy Donovan. I thought he pushed all the right buttons in this series as a rookie NBA head coach. Way to go, way to go, way to go. Now, forgive me for this, Mr. Smith, but this whole notion that I keep hearing, not just from you, but from all the analysts, that all of a sudden my Spurs looked old and slow and unathletic, I got to tell you, it's flat out laughable to me, because allow me to put this in some perspective. My Spurs won 67 games in the regular season. That's tied for 7th best all time. And my Spurs won the first game of this series 124-92 by 32 points. And my Spurs then went up in Game 3 to Oklahoma City and won impressively in Game 3 to take a 2-1 lead in this series. My Spurs were in position. My old, slow, unathletic Spurs were in fourth quarter position to win all 5 of the first 5 games. And the NBA itself admitted that it blew 2 calls in the final minute of the pivotal Game 5 in San Antonio that helped cost my Spurs that game and helped cancel out 2 late, humongous Oklahoma City right on schedule turnovers, one by Russell Westbrook and one by Kevin Durant. And I want to remind everyone, for perspective, going into last night's game, that my old, slow, unathletic San Antonio Spurs opened as a 2.5-point favorite to win Game 6 at Oklahoma City. And I also want to keep it in perspective. To your point, Mr. Smith, about the start of last night's game, I'm not going to say they came out and played angry, but I saw Spurs. I saw vintage San Antonio Spurs for the first 8 minutes of that game. They led 19-13. They were locked in, and I thought they were pretty much in control of that game. 19-13 with 4 minutes left in the first quarter. Now, to your point, from that point through the second quarter until halftime, so that's 4 minutes plus 12 minutes. For the next 16 minutes, trust me on this. You'll say it's hyperbole, but it's not. It was the sorriest, saddest stretch in Spurs playoff history. And I should know, I have been a diehard Spurs fan since the George Gervin era, long before my city, Oklahoma City, even thought about having a professional basketball team, an NBA team. I was a Spurs fan, and in all the Spurs playoff games I've ever watched, given the circumstances, given what had happened in the first 5 games, given that they were up 19-13 in Game 6 at Oklahoma City, a place that in 2014 they won Game 6 to get to the NBA Finals, this was as devastating, as mind-blowing, as stomach-turning, as inexplicable a stretch as I have ever seen. I have no logic. I don't have reason for it. I couldn't sleep because I couldn't figure it out. But in that stretch, they got outscored 42-12. My San Antonio Spurs, who won 67 games and who had won 2 of the first 3 games, 42-12. They shot 5 of 28 in that stretch. That's 16%. 16%, 5 for 28. It's mind-blowing to me, Stephen A., that nobody could make a shot. It's shot after open shot. LaMarcus Aldridge couldn't make a shot. Tim Duncan couldn't make a shot. Kawhi Leonard couldn't make a shot. I just sat there in awe of how inexplicably awful this stretch was. And to your point, it was ball game. It was over at halftime. Obviously, my Spurs snapped out of it in the second half, and they actually won the second half 68-58. They scored 34 and 34 in the third and fourth quarter. They scored 19 and 12 in the first 2 quarters. 19 and 12, so it's 68 points in the second half to 31 in the first half. That's the biggest discrepancy of points scored in a half in the last 15 years in the NBA playoffs. It's baffling to me. I don't know, unless maybe they fell into the LaMarcus Aldridge trap in the first 2 games in which he made 33 of 44 shots, and they just got so dependent on LaMarcus that they kept lobbing the ball into him, and all of a sudden the stage got too big for him, as we've talked about for the last 3 days on this show. I sat there wondering, where is Boris Diaw? He has been instant offense for my Spurs all year long and for the last 4 or 5 years. When you needed quick points, you went to Boris. He played 0 minutes last night. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if he got doghoused by Coach Popovich. I don't know. But I kept saying, somebody do something, because this team is too good to be that bad. But they were that bad, and all of a sudden, because they lost it, then they lost the game and they lost the series. And they did so inexplicably because they were so good in other stretches of this series. But I don't want to hear that they suddenly got old and slow and unathletic. I've been hearing that for the last, 5 or 6 years about this team. And again, when this team loses, it always looks old and slow and unathletic. Problem is, it hasn't lost all that much over the last 5 or 6 years. It looked bad last night, but I don't think it's because of age and attrition. We're going to talk about it later, but I won't be surprised if Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili come back next year because, truthfully, big picture, they both had very good years. You can say they didn't have great playoffs. Duncan, as you point out, was very good last night by his playoff standards. But again, that stretch did in my San Antonio Spurs in ways that I have never, ever seen before from this franchise in this kind of moment.
Well, let me say this to you respectfully. I don't believe you. And I will tell you why by giving you specific dates. May 25th, 2001. And then 2 days later, May 27th, 2001. It was the second of the three-peat for the Los Angeles Lakers with Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant and them. If you recall, that was a night, I believe it was a Friday night, where the Los Angeles Lakers ran the San Antonio Spurs out of the Staples Center. They went up, they won the game 111-72. And Jack Nicholson was literally looking at the camera with the choke sign, "Take their heart, take their heart." And Tim Duncan was sitting on the bench looking like he was about to cry with Greg Popovich patting him on the shoulders. I believe that run was far more profound than what we saw last night, because in games 3 and 4 of that series, the Lakers won 111-72 and then followed it up with the 4-game sweep, winning 111-82. I think when you talk about you've never seen the Spurs that as bad as you saw them through that 16-minute stretch last night, I would beg to differ.
Can I respond?
Said all of that,
may I respond?
Sure.
I was at that game and covered that series. Completely different than what we saw last night. Those Spurs had no chance against those Lakers. And I've told you before, that stretch by Shaquille O'Neal was the most dominating single-player stretch I've ever witnessed in the history of basketball. That's just me. He was invincible. He was unstoppable. Neither David Robinson nor Tim Duncan, or the combination thereof, could begin to deal with Shaquille O'Neal and to a certain extent, Kobe Bryant, obviously, is the 1-2 punch. But, Stephen A., that's a sweep. That's no hope. That wasn't because the Spurs were inept and they couldn't make shots. They had no chance against that team. It was a mismatch. This clearly was no mismatch because we'd seen 5 games already that the Spurs were in position in the fourth quarter to win. They were good enough to do this. This wasn't about the Thunder.
That's a fair dichotomy.
Okay.
That's fair. Fine enough. That's fair.
Okay.
But I think what you're missing, I think what you're also missing is that, Skip, nobody's being disrespectful to the San Antonio Spurs. And you are right in terms of saying, folks have counted them out before. But why did we count them out before? When we looked at the San Antonio Spurs and you wondered how much Tim Duncan had left, okay, you contemplated whether or not he was going to retire. You wondered at time because Manu Ginobili was hurt a few years ago. He wasn't 100% when he went up against the Heat and what have you. You wondered about his future as well. And then those were the things that prompted the questions. But you didn't have that extra dust on the birth certificate. And a lot of times, I remember Kobe said this to me. Kobe came into this season possibly entertaining playing 2 additional years, Skip. Literally possibly entertaining playing 2 additional years. And he went out there, Skip, one night and said, damn, it's gone. I don't have it anymore. And so what happens is that it's not always a gradual regression that takes place. Sometimes you literally wake up and it's like it's over. What I was and what I could do, I can't do it anymore. And I think that when you look at the Spurs from Game 3 and how slowly but surely, methodically speaking, the regression appeared to take place as Oklahoma City's youth and enthusiasm and physicality ultimately was taking over and dictating this series. I think that's what you have to pay attention to here. So certainly Tim Duncan can make a contribution and Manu Ginobili can make a contribution, et cetera, et cetera. But I also think it's also piggybacking off of what we saw from Kobe. How many times did you sit right there in that chair, Skip, literally sad to the point where it was breaking your heart to watch Kobe, because the guy that you once knew was no more? And I'm saying it came, bam, it's here, it has arrived. It looked like that is what happened to the San Antonio Spurs as this season waned, not in terms of their ability, not in terms of their willingness and ability to play together, but it was just something so flagrantly missing from their legs, their youth, their energy, their vibrancy. It wasn't something that was sustainable over the course of 48 minutes through the games. And I think that's what people are looking at when they're saying, damn, this very well could be it. Tim Duncan, last night, Skip, you know this better than most. That was all heart, man. That was the heart of a champion. Coming out and saying, I'm not going out like this. 0-point game, 2-point game, 1 field goal, et cetera, et cetera. This is the brink of elimination. I'm not having this. That's what that was. That is what that was. That was something special that the rare ones can pull out of their hat. But that's what it is.
Okay, I've told you now for 2 weeks. Tim Duncan back, it was late January, and then it sort of bled into February. He hurt his good knee. He's had one bad knee that he's been able to work around and play at a high level. I don't know, because they are pretty closed-mouthed, tight-lipped about this. I'm not sure how bad it was. I'm going to guess he needs some sort of surgery on his quote-unquote good knee. And he missed 8 games and tried to come back and played okay down the stretch of the season. But clearly, he lost it offensively, where he had no more spring at all to the basket, where he became a liability going to the basket. You could almost dare him to go to the basket, and he couldn't. I agree with you. On guts and guile and sheer will, heart of a champion, he scored 19 points last night. My disappointment was, and I also told you this, Tony Parker of the Big Three is still young enough to be a contributor. And obviously, it's a point guard-driven game now with Russell Westbrook and Steph Curry. And, it's just the way the game is played. It's been turned upside down. There were times 2, 3, 4 years ago, I thought Tony Parker was the best point guard. At the end of Game 4 in Oklahoma City, if you'll recall, Tony Parker had a collision in the lane and went down, and it looked like he had hurt himself badly. It looked like he turned his ankle or something was wrong with his lower leg, and he limped back up court but finished the game, and then he kept playing through the series, and he lost his burst. The problem last night to me was he couldn't get in the lane at all on anybody. Whoever guarded him could keep him out of the lane. And you know what happens when you can't get in the lane, because Durant and Westbrook were just getting in the lane at will last night on my Spurs, and it creates havoc. You can't stop it because everybody else gets open from it. Tony Parker could not create open shots off his dribble. It cost him, obviously, at the end of Game 5 when he had 2 big chances to win the game and wound up with a late, rushed, indecisive jump shot that didn't even sniff the rim or sniff going into the basket, obviously. And in this case, last night, he became a liability more than Ginobili and Duncan did. I will give you that. I'll also give you, I've raved all year about Jonathan Simmons being a young, stud, athletic, explosive player. This is Pop. This is your issue with him. He's going to ride the veterans home, the guys who got him there. He's going to dance with who brung him. And in this case, Jonathan Simmons didn't dress for this series. So he's just saying he's a kid, he doesn't know how to play, and maybe he would have helped last night. I don't know. But that stretch, when I'm looking at what happened in that stretch where they went cold, David West 0 for 3, LaMarcus 1 for 4, Kawhi 1 for 5, Tim Duncan 0 for 4. You're going to lose, man. At Oklahoma City, they're going to go crazy, and they did go crazy because you're right. They smelled your blood. They started getting out off your misses on the break, and it's over in front of that crowd in that building.
Well, let's also keep in mind that LaMarcus Aldridge was supposed to be the quintessential successor to Tim Duncan. And even though he ultimately finished with a few points, he had about 18 points.
Yeah.
The bottom line is clear. You expect more from him. In a game of that magnitude, it's not enough to be good. It's not enough to be decent. You need to be a star. LaMarcus Aldridge, 6'11". LaMarcus Aldridge shot 9 of 18 from the field, 18 points, decent numbers. Here's the problem. He did not get to the free throw line one time.
Nope.
At no time did he put himself in a position to stop the bleeding. That's something Tim Duncan would have done. That's what LaMarcus Aldridge has to work on.
I agree.
All right, let's leave it there. Now it's on to the next one for those Thunder. Now, they weren't able to defend Steph Curry in the regular season. Will they be able to do it in the conference finals? That's the question when we come back. First Take, just getting started.